I still remember the sound more than the words ceramic cracking against concrete coffee, spreading like a dark stain across the runway, and the laughter that followed casual, careless practice. "Watch where you're going," the man said, not even looking at me. Some of us have actual jobs. I was on my knees with a rag in my hand, the morning heat already pushing through my uniform, the air thick with jet fuel and impatience. Behind him, a prototype aircraft shimmered under the sun, all sharp lines and expensive ambition. Around us, people in pressed shirts and polished boots moved like I wasn't there. To them, I was background noise, maintenance, a woman with a cart. I nodded because that's what you do when you're invisible. What they didn't know, what no one in that place bothered to ask, was that I'd stood on hotter tarmacs than this with engines screaming inches behind me, my heart steady at Mach speeds most people only see in movies. But that part of my life wasn't something I wore on my sleeve. Not anymore. I had learned the hard way that when people see your title before they see your face, they stop listening. So I took the title away. That morning, the man who kicked over my coffee was named Grant Holloway, Senior Operations Director, former test pilot, the kind of guy who reminded you of his resume before you ever asked. He talked loud, walked fast, and treated everyone below him like gravity, something to step on. As I wiped the coffee off the concrete, I heard him arguing with a group of engineers near the hangar doors. "The instability is pilot input," he said confidently. "I've flown worse. The system is fine." A young engineer tried to respond, careful, nervous. "Sir, the data shows." Grant cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Data doesn't fly planes. Experience does." That's when something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Just that quiet click in the back of your mind when you realize a lie has been repeated so many times it's starting to sound like policy. I pushed my cart away and went back to work. People think silence means weakness. Sometimes it does. Other times it's strategy. For years I had moved through that facility cleaning floors, emptying trash, listening. You'd be surprised what people say when they think you're too unimportant to understand. I learned who took credit, who got sidelined, who was always almost ready for promotion, but never quite there. The pattern was familiar, too familiar. That afternoon I watched Grant present a solution he hadn't come up with. I recognized the math elegant, cautious, smart. It belonged to someone else. A younger engineer named Eli, who stood at the back of the room, pretending not to notice his work being paraded under another man's name. I caught Eli later in the break room staring at the vending machine like it had personally betrayed him. "He didn't even change the variables," Eli muttered, "just slapped his name on it." I handed him a paper towel. "You okay?" He laughed bitterly. "I will be. Just didn't think it'd happen like this." "Men like that don't steal ideas because they need them," I said. "They steal them because they're afraid of who gets credit." Eli looked at me like he wanted to ask how I knew that, but didn't. People rarely ask janitors for wisdom. That night, long after the building emptied, I walked past the simulation lab. The screens were still on, numbers frozen mid-calculation. I stopped longer than I should have. The instability was real, worse than Grant admitted, and someone had changed the parameters not to fix the issue, but to hide it. That's the moment silence became a choice instead of a habit. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't report it. I went home, unlocked a door I rarely opened, and sat in a room that smelled faintly of old leather and dust. On the wall were things from another life, framed certificates, flight patches, a helmet with a call sign scratched along the side. I ran my fingers over it and felt the weight of 8 years press into my chest. I hadn't planned to step back into that world. Not like this. The next morning, everything escalated. Military observers arrived. Executives started sweating. Grant walked taller than usual, voice booming, confident, sharpened by the audience. During the briefing, he announced a live demonstration flight. That's when my stomach dropped. The system wasn't ready. I knew it. Eli knew it. Anyone who actually listened to the data knew it. But Grant needed a win, a clean, dramatic success to silence the questions and lock in the funding. And when Eli tried to speak up, Grant turned on him. "Your access has been revoked," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "We don't have time for sabotage disguised as concern." Security stepped forward. Eli went pale. That was it. I felt 8 years of restraint snap like a cable under tension. "The parameters were altered," I said. The room froze. Grant turned slowly, irritation dripping from his smile. "Excuse me." "They were altered." I repeated, my voice steadier than I felt. to make his model fail and yours succeed. The record's still on your tablet. Someone laughed nervously. A janitor interrupting a high-level briefing wasn't on anyone's schedule. Grant scoffed. And how would you know that? I reached up, unclipped my badge, and set it on the table. The sound it made was small, but the silence afterward was enormous. Because I've seen this failure mode before, I said. At transonic speeds, same architecture, same mistake. One of the military officers frowned. You're saying you recognize this system? I'm saying I survived it. Grant's face drained of color. This is ridiculous. I met his eyes. 8 years ago, an aircraft went down during a test you investigated. You blamed pilot error, buried the software fault. That pilot was me. You could feel the room tilt. Recognition rippled through the officers. Someone said my name quietly, like they were afraid it might break. Grant stammered. That's impossible. It's inconvenient, I corrected. There's a difference. They verified everything. The altered data, the old reports, the crash findings that never quite added up. Grant tried to fight it, tried to assert authority, but authority doesn't mean much once the truth is on the table. Then came the final test, side-by-side simulations. Same conditions, same parameters. Grant flew aggressively by the book, forcing the aircraft through instability like willpower could bend physics. His screen went red. I flew the way I always had, listening, adapting, letting the plane tell me what it needed. The recovery wasn't pretty, but it worked. My simulation stabilized and carried on. No applause, no cheers, just quiet understanding. They grounded the demonstration, launched an investigation. Grant stopped talking. Later, as I walked out past the hangar, the air felt different. Lighter, like a storm had finally moved on. I didn't feel victorious. I felt done. 6 months later, the program was redesigned. New leadership, new protocols. Eli got his name on his work. Others came forward with stories they'd kept buried. As for me, I didn't go back to wearing a badge with a title on it. I stayed exactly who I was, just no longer invisible. Because the truth doesn't need volume, it needs timing. And sometimes the people you step over on your way up are the only ones who can stop you from falling. So let me ask you this. Do you think power actually changes people? Or does it just give them permission to finally show who they've been all along?